Hello, and welcome back to Science with Sully. Today, we're going to discuss the electron transport chain and ATP synthesis because it's hard to discuss one without the other as they both kind of do go together. But basically, this is how we derive energy. So we're going to look at the processes, the proteins involved, and the mechanisms that we use to derive our ATP and in turn derive energy. So this is all taking place in mitochondria. So if it's a bacteria, it doesn't have mitochondria. Or a virus, it doesn't have mitochondria. So this is only happening in cells with mitochondria. It's also not happening in plant cells, but they have chloroplasts that do something similar. So in our mitochondria, we have a bilayer, just like on our cell membranes, on the outer cell membrane, I should say. So this is our mitochondrial bilayer. And this would be called the matrix. And this, the intermembrane space. So we have byproducts that came in from the citric acid cycle, NADH and FADH, and those are intermediates that will travel to the mitochondria so this process can take place. So we'll start it out. We have an NADH, and that NADH comes in contact with our first protein, and that protein is called complex 1. So what happens? NADH comes in contact with complex 1 and becomes NAD plus, and complex 1 takes that hydrogen and puts it in the intermembrane space. Let's make our hydrogens different color. Let's make our hydrogens blue. What happens next? Well, the proton was pushed into the intermembrane space, but the electron that was on that hydrogen is moved. And it is moved right here. That'll be our electron. That electron goes and it hits another protein called coenzyme Q. Well, we've got another protein that is going to contribute, and it is going to be right here, and it is going to be called complex 2. Call it C2. And C2 is going to take an FADH2, which we got from the citric acid cycle, and convert that to FAD plus an H plus. So it took one of the hydrogen, the electron, and it's also going to send an electron to coenzyme Q. While that hydrogen one is here, the other hydrogen is going to come up and join this other hydrogen in our intermembrane space. Well, we've got another protein called complex 3. And what's complex 3 going to do? Well, this hydrogen down here needs to be transported out, and it is by complex 3. Our concentration of hydrogen is increasing on the intermembrane space. That's the big important thing right here. So we've also got electrons going down to our next protein, complex 4. Very easy to remember. And these electrons are electrons from hydrogens. So what happens next? Well, this is also complex 4 is going to take this hydrogen, these electrons, and the oxygen that we breathe is here, O2. Well, we have enzymes that break that in half and have it as each oxygen atom as its individual self. It's no longer a diatomic gas. So we have an oxygen atom. Well, complex 4 sends 2 of those hydrogen atoms and reduces this oxygen. And what does it reduce to? This reaction is a reduction, and reduction is gaining electrons. So if you reduce oxygen, it forms 2 bonds to an H and an H. So our oxygen that we breathe in is actually reduced to water. That takes care of the electrons that kept bouncing right here and right here. So this also sends a hydrogen into our inner membrane space. So we are really building our concentration of hydrogens. Now we have this protein over here, and it kind of looks like this. And this protein is called ATP synthase. And as you guess, probably, it creates ATP. So we could write the chemical equation ADP plus an inorganic phosphate. They go through this protein and become ATP. Well, this protein requires energy, but it doesn't use ATP as its energy. It uses the proton gradient, the concentration gradient of hydrogen. So all of those hydrogens push through from a high concentration to a low concentration, and that in turn stimulates or turns, quite literally like a turnstile, turns this protein, and it actually takes these 2 molecules and smashes them together to create our ATP. So this hydrogen will just go back and find an NAD plus and just hop right back on and then start the process all over while continuously making ATP. And our electron, while we were only pumping protons into the inner membrane space, we had to account for our electrons, and our electrons came down and reduced oxygen that we breathe in into water. So through this, we have ATP and water. So I hope this was a beneficial quick rundown of ATP synthesis in the electron transport chain and some of the proteins involved. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe to this video, and be awaiting for more content coming out with Science with Sully. Thank you.